broken, Canada's broken, and Canada's broken because we're stupid. Okay, Canada's broken because we're stupid.
Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. This one is hysterical. I just watched it. I'm going to watch it with you now. And we have David Cochrane going out doing a scrum. This video pretty much explains itself. Watch it to the end. It's hysterical. These liberals are trying to act like there's not major dissent in the Liberal Party. It's a pretty serious thing. They take their pot shots at the Conservatives every chance they get. The fake Conservative that's on this panel is being paid by CBC to be on there, and he's a fired consultant anyways. Doesn't matter. The rest are all Liberals stroking Mark Carney still, but oh man, they're in denial. Carney's making moves that are going to tear up the Liberal Party, just like he's tearing up Canada. He is a con man. He's not a politician. He is a banker, and a greedy one at that. He doesn't care about people or parties or politics. He cares about Brookfield's bottom line. Anyways, this is a very fun video to watch. Let's get straight into it.
Oh, yeah.
There were lots of conversations about and inside the Liberal caucus today, and the agreement the Prime Minister is finalizing with Premier Danielle Smith. This morning, Natural Resources Minister Tim Hodgson briefed the BC Liberal caucus on the high-level details of this MOU. A government source called it a good and substantive discussion, but other sources in the meeting saw things a bit differently. Upset they were that the minister used words like naive and ideological to describe their political and environmental concerns, adding to their frustration over the lack of internal briefings and consultations until today. I went out to Parliament Hill earlier today to ask MPs about how these talks went. Can I just ask you whether you think you've calmed down the BC caucus over the possibility of a pipeline? We know they're upset about the idea.
Caucus is totally united.
On a pipeline, no problems?
I think you have to read the MOU.
I just want to know if you're entirely comfortable with the idea of a memorandum of understanding for a bitumen pipeline, and how do you think that's playing overall with caucus?
Okay, I have to look at it, David, first and foremost. I think we've gotten kind of ahead of ourselves. What's being lost in here is that there's no, right now, private proponent that is willing to do anything.
Mr. Robertson, you want to talk about the pipeline? Can you stop for a second, Mr. Robertson, to talk about how do you sell a pipeline to the people of BC who don't want one, though, sir?
I already said. I stand behind the Prime Minister on this, and hopefully, not hopefully, there will be good news coming out tomorrow.
Are you reassured by what you've heard from the Prime Minister and Mr. Hodgson today about a possible pipeline to the coast of BC?
Well, I know that as a First Nations person, that the title and rights of First Nations and Indigenous communities are of the utmost importance, and to ensure that as much consultation and agreement with First Nations is the most important for anything to go forward.
How comfortable are you with the notion of the memorandum of understanding to eventually have a bitumen pipeline go to the coast of BC?
Well, I said this on my way in, and it stands because I'm not going to talk about caucus conversations, but the Prime Minister will announce the details tomorrow. I'm sure I will have lots to say, and I will have a more fulsome answer in terms of how I think things are going and how we could improve upon things.
Now, another dynamic at play in all of this is the future of Stephen Guilbeault, the Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture. And sources say there have been ongoing conversations between Guilbeault and the Prime Minister's office, with the lifelong environmental activist expressing concerns about the compromises being made on the government's environmental policies. There have been internal concerns that Stephen Guilbeault could resign over this. But as of right now, sources say Guilbeault is staying due to the belief he can do more at the table than by walking away. We're going to talk about all of this with the Power Panel. Amanda Alvaro is a former Liberal Party communications strategist. Cheryl Oates was Director of Communications for former Alberta NDP Premier Rachel Notley. And here with me in the studio, Tim Powers is a former strategist for Conservative parties. And Sherelle Evelyn is the Managing Editor of the Hill Times. Amanda, some interesting times for the Liberals right now. A lot of the BC MPs and others who on the more progressive side, they're worried they're going to take the political hit of a pipeline, take the political hit of rolling back things like the tanker ban without necessarily getting a pipeline that jolts the Canadian economy. What do you make of the situation the government finds itself in?
Well, listen, I think that, BC caucus members who are expressing concerns, those are valid concerns, they're justified concerns, and they reflect their constituents. That's what they were sent to Ottawa to do. So that makes perfect sense. But what I was mostly hearing was like, let's wait until we see the MOU tomorrow. Let's wait until we see the details. The reality that we find ourselves in isn't the 2024 reality. It's the 2025 reality. And I think that context is everything. Discussions that we had about pipelines previously are sort of moot given the circumstances that we're in. And, you know, you see that when the Prime Minister makes an address today to talk about sectoral supports for the really hard hit industries of steel and softwood lumber, which I think we're going to talk about in a little bit. But he talks about the impact of these U.S. tariffs. 1.8% of our GDP, $50 billion. So when you have Alberta knocking with their vast natural resources and they're talking about the tens of billions of dollars that can be put back into the economy, and they're talking about diversifying our trade relationships by being able to ship more oil to Asian markets, I mean, the Prime Minister would be, in my opinion, he would be foolish. It would be negligent for him to at least not entertain these discussions. And I think it's incumbent upon those BC MPs to obviously reflect their constituents' concerns, but also be open because of the circumstance that we find ourselves in.
Cheryl, you know, this is, we're being constantly told it will be a starting point, not an end point, obviously, the memorandum of understanding that's being signed tomorrow. And then it's kind of up to Daniel Smith, as the leader of the government that is the proponent, to go deal with BC, go deal with the First Nations, and deal with the private sector. What is the expectation in the Alberta public for this announcement tomorrow? Because, you know, Carney and Smith in Calgary, and then Carney at the Chamber of Commerce, that's not normal stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk right now about people upset or excited about a pipeline being announced tomorrow. And I think I could look silly tomorrow, but I don't think a pipeline is being announced tomorrow. I think a path towards a pipeline is being announced tomorrow. And it's a complicated path. And if we're talking about Alberta saying, we will come to the table with a more stringent industrial carbon price, we will come to the table with funding for carbon capture, utilization, and storage, those are big wins for those who have been pushing for more climate action. But an actual path towards a pipeline, I mean, we still need a proponent to build the pipeline. We still need, as Mark Carney has said, buy-in from the BC government and from First Nations, which so far have been not even interested in coming to the table. And so the idea of an actual project with an actual route being considered and passing all the hurdles that it would need to have a real pipeline project on the table, for me, just seems so far off that those who are saying, you know, we can't build another pipeline right now, that's a conversation for months or potentially years down the road. Right now, no one is at the table saying they're going to build a pipeline.
Right, but Tim, as I understand it, kind of the hope once this MOU is signed is that they can get to a point where they can maybe have a proponent by May and try to get, you know, the application into the major projects office in a material way that's not just the government of Alberta. So certainly there's a hope that this leads to some propulsion.
Yeah, but hope's the right word here, because Mark Carney was the hope that the Liberals would continue to govern. For many of those Liberals that are now expressing frustration around this, but I think the reality is, and Mark Carney, to be fair to the Prime Minister, never hid this, he isn't the sort of politician who wants to be here, I think, for 10, 15 years. He believes he's been elected to come in and shake things up, and this is certainly shaking things up. And what is it doing? Shaking up the alignment of the Liberal Party, the 2015 Liberal Party that was fully supportive and selected and empowered by Justin Trudeau, and that's the way it should have been at that point in time, is now getting shaken out a little bit. I mean, the Guilbeault story is a fascinating one, David. I'm sure Manda would agree with me on this. I'm sort of surprised he's still here, to be honest. There was a lot of speculation that he probably wouldn't have run again, but I think the Carney people wanted him to help them in Quebec. I would be shocked if he's still here in a year from now, because to be fair to Minister Guilbeault, his career has been about being green. So maybe he finds a way to go away without doing damage to the Liberal Party, but change within the party is inevitable, because I don't think Carney is about to get into the normal horse trading that maybe another politician who wants to be in power for a decade would.
Yeah, like I'm told, you know, Stephen Guilbeault still supports Prime Minister Carney, so thinks he's the right person for it. But, you know, there are some challenges with the shift in policy going back to the dropping of the carbon tax, and opposition leaders weighed in today on this potential pipeline and some of the divisions it is causing. Have a listen to this.
Here we go.
Canadians want a pipeline. They know it's the best way to get our resources to market going around the United States of America. But his Keep It in the Ground caucus is standing in the way. Why doesn't he stand up to them and stand up for Canada?
You shouldn't be selling the idea that the future of Canada is in oil and gas. Don't promise things that you cannot deliver or that you should not deliver.
So Cheryl, you know, never a dull moment, it seems, since here with the Liberal caucus, but there's some tensions there now, and the opposition's hammering at those fault lines.
Yeah, of course they are, and they should as the opposition, because you want to expose those fault lines, expose those weaknesses, and exploit them where they can. I mean, what we saw with, we've seen a few times, I think, with the Prime Minister, is that there's a bit of an unwillingness to read people in and really disseminate information about what is going on within the inner circle. And that leaves people feeling ostracized, and then they tend to freelance. And then things kind of go a little screwy. It's not that people can't disagree. I think that's healthy for people, even within a caucus, to disagree. But we saw it with the premiers, when he's talking to the United States. You had Premier Doug Ford going his own way and doing ads. You saw David Eby kind of threatening to do the same, but then he eventually pulled back once they were able to sit down and have that conversation with Dominic LeBlanc and things like that. So what we also saw today was, some of these MPs who were a little, feeling a certain way about these talks because they don't know what's going on and they hadn't heard what's going on. Then they were feeling that, like, well, I need to speak out because it might push somebody to actually talk to me and talk to the caucus and tell us what's happening, and B, I need to signal to my constituents that I hear what's going on and I'm listening. But for the opposition, of course, this is kind of what they want. Everybody else, in the last couple of weeks, the Conservatives, they've been on the back foot. They need to find a new way in. I don't know if they've completely landed on it. I mean, it was kind of interesting today to see the Conservative leader tweeting out, meet me at the flagpole.
Bike racks 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
Let's go.
At the same time, I should have taken a screenshot because it was literally at the same time. You had the Prime Minister, on social media saying, watch my announcement live, and you had right above that the Conservative leaders saying, the Prime Minister's in hiding. So I don't know if they've completely landed on it. But this is the kind of thing I think right now they should be doing, just to say, hey, this isn't an issue of unity, it's not an issue of caucus unity, and this is a national unity. Like, there are going to be divisions on this, and the Prime Minister needs to be accountable and answer to all of them.
Yeah, look, just building on a couple of things Sherelle said. For sure, the Conservatives are delighted that they can push a story about division in the Liberal caucus, and there is division in the Liberal caucus. Whether it takes on the same dimensions or not, time will tell that. I think what's fascinating, though, and Sherelle also gets at this, is how does, and this, so far the Conservatives haven't figured this out, how do they get at Mark Carney? Look, Mark Carney has stolen a lot of Conservative arguments that people have liked, and he's run with them. There is no danger if somehow the Liberals and Danielle Smith got to a pipeline that the Conservatives are going to lose Alberta, but it does then sort of create a challenge to a degree for Pierre Poilievre as to, all right, how do I get people to turn on this guy other than hoping the clock runs out? Doesn't mean he doesn't have the skills to get there, but it presents a new challenge for him if this comes through.
My favorite Conservative criticism this week on social media is that if this was happening in the Conservative caucus, it would be national news. Like, what do you think this is? But anyway, Cheryl, I want to ask you questions about the more about the Alberta angle before I come back to Amanda. If this does lead to a pipeline, what does this potentially do to Alberta politics? I speak to some Conservatives I know out there, and certainly there's a sense this could change the dynamic in the cities, in different ways. Edmonton might react differently than Calgary, but it may open some things up for the Liberals. Now, the BC Liberals are worried about a negative thing, but what's the upside for the Liberals on this politically in Alberta?
I mean, I think the biggest upside is that Danielle Smith stands down a little bit in terms of her ongoing attacks on Ottawa. Like, you've seen her lately in the press and, behind closed doors, playing a lot nicer with Mark Carney than she has certainly with Justin Trudeau, but even with Mark Carney since he was elected. And you've seen her, the level of rhetoric that she's throwing at Ottawa is sort of saying, like, all of these problems that Alberta has are because Ottawa did this and this and this. You've seen that sort of toned down recently. And that is, I think, the biggest win, is that Danielle Smith stops talking like that and stops threatening that Alberta might leave Canada, or that she would pave the way for those who want to leave Canada to have a vote.
Is there an electoral win, though, Cheryl? Does it change the map in any way, potentially? Like, how do you see it in terms of seats? Is it hard to know?
I think, okay, I'm a little jaded because I worked in a government that did get a pipeline built and then was not reelected in Alberta. And so
I hear you. I hear you.
Fair.
I don't think that this changes. I don't think this changes the electoral map. I think Conservatives will be very happy to see Danielle Smith lead the charge and see a pipeline making progress, especially ahead of her AGM this weekend.
Yeah, I had a Liberal say to me, we watched this movie 6 years ago, Amanda, and it didn't work out too great when they bought and built a TMX, right? But you know, you have this situation where, you know, there is, like, once the details of this MOU come out tomorrow, that will really determine which way a lot of the Liberal caucus goes. They need to see it and whether they can live with it and whether it can be justified and whether they can sell it. The criticism from the Conservatives, I wonder what do you make of this, Mr. Poilievre calling it a meaningless MOU? Like, the Premier of Alberta is signing a meaningless MOU? It's kind of like, I know you're trying to not give Mark Carney any credit, but like, what are you saying about Danielle Smith here?
The criticism is meaningless. Like, you listen to Poilievre in the House today or watch his comments over X, and it's almost comical because it's like, wow, how far have you fallen? I mean, this is the extent of the criticism. Come meet me so we can debate about it. I mean, Carney is eating his lunch on some of these areas. This is a huge concern. I agree totally with what Tim said. There are areas that the Conservative Party has dominated on topically for years. They've been able to drive these narratives, drive this conversation. And with Carney swinging a little further to their side and taking some of that momentum out of their talking points, it feels like they've had a hard time playing catch up. And so you end up with these pretty bland, and especially for Poilievre, who's such a master communicator, but these pretty bland criticisms, like it might be meaningless. Well, we don't, the MOU's not even out yet. And certainly the amount of attention over it, the amount of seemingly like concern, issues, excitement, like you name the emotion attached to it, it feels like the absolute opposite of meaningless.
Yeah, and depending on the details, it's a memorandum or it's a memorandum.
Oh, yeah.
We'll wrap it up right there, gang. Aaron, Canadian Looney. I found that one to be very funny to watch. David Cochrane in the scrums, then that panel, which is, they don't even know how to handle like what they're supposed to do with their own propaganda, because the Liberal Party is going to be torn apart by Mark Carney. Are they going to support that? Are they going to support the Prime Minister then? Like, when are they going to realize that he's not a politician? He's a con man, snake oil salesman, banker that only wants to make Brookfield and his Goldman Sachs buddies richer. That's the bottom line. Anyhow, my name's Aaron. Thank you for watching this video. Check out one of the other videos floating around here. They'll be fun too. We might learn something. Aaron, Canadian Looney, frontline politics from the House of Commons most of the time. We watch some legacy media on here as well. That's it. Catch you in the next video. Like, share, subscribe.